promote them. But first, I want to kick off by welcoming Neil Harrington, who's a member of the group here, longtime listener, first time caller, maybe, I don't know. But Neil has volunteered to show us his process and something that he's working on. I think this is a fairly recent use case, right, Neil? Like, tell us a little, well, first of all, tell the group a little bit about yourself, and then tell us a little bit about how you stumbled upon this use case that you're going to share.
Yeah, so Neil Harrington, I've been in sales my whole life for 25 plus years. I've worked at large organizations like Microsoft. I've worked at really, really small organizations as well. I worked with Christina at Topo. I was an analyst for a number of months and then was in the sales team for 3.5 years. So I've kind of been all over the place. I always have an eye for sort of numbers and insights that aren't just sort of always freely givenable on like in Salesforce. And when I was at Microsoft, I literally had a team of analysts that would go and dissect numbers, but they didn't know the business. So they present numbers back to me, but the numbers didn't really make sense because they weren't sure what sales was or what was used to the business. And so I've always been looking for that like edge on like insights. And so anytime I'm trolling Reddit or LinkedIn, I'm always looking for how do I get better insights. And so I've stumbled upon this and brought it up to Christina, and we thought we'd share with the group.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so tell us I think it's worth noting for everyone on the call, this use case is what, a week and a half old, Neil? Like it's a
For
fairly
me, yeah,
recent, yeah,
for
for
me, I've
you.
been doing this about 3 weeks. And then I
Okay,
think
three
the
weeks.
technology's only sort of been available for 3-ish months. Some people on the call may be like, oh no, there was a secret handshake before, but generally about 3 months old.
Yeah, and so tell us what sort of made you, well, first of all, tell them what you did and sort of any setup that we need to understand why you did what you did.
Yeah, just because I have to write things down and I'm a visual person, I just put these things down. So if you wanted to like
Perfect.
screenshot them, um, so generally the thing that we're going to be talking about today is using Salesforce and MCP. We'll go through what that means. We'll be live in the demo. It took me a little bit of an afternoon to figure out how to make it so it's for public consumption. Then we're going to go through some sort of canned stuff that I've done before and happy to hear everybody else's thing. And then obviously disclosure, I've randomized and anonymized and sanitized everything. And then I'm running on a local LLM personally because of my security requirements, but I'm going to show you everything that can be done very quickly.
And I think everyone will understand pretty quickly why it's anonymized and sanitized because there's some rep sensitivity here we want to be mindful of, but go ahead.
Yeah. So an MCP was released. An MCP is called Model Control Protocol. And what it was it was brought out by Anthropic uh, late last year, but understanding that like not many people caught on. And then all of a sudden in sort of March of this year, it just exploded. And MCP, the protocol, is a lot like an API on steroids. So with like an API, you're just pushing back and forth sort of structured data, like, oh, we can push Christina into the CRM as a name, and then we can get something back. With MCP, you can push code into something, you can receive that data back. And so it makes it very quickly that you can do really interesting things. Um, oops. And then my tech stack is actually relatively simple. So I have a Salesforce account with API access. You have to have Claude desktop, so you have to actually download Claude. And then Node.js for the techies on the call. You can go to Node.js, their website. They have an application that you can just double click. And then you very quickly run out of the sort of normal credits on Claude. So I had to like get to the max edition pretty quickly because I immediately started like hammering questions to it. And then for the MCP side, download a node, then you have to install this npm package, which is a node package. And then in the config file in the Claude desktop, you go to settings, developer, and they've got the things set up for you. So it's relatively set up, easy.
I want to just jump in because I don't want it to scare anyone away on this call because there are words here that are somewhat foreign to most go-to-market folks. Even though there are things in here that seem very programmy, a lot of these are copy and paste connector type of actions. They are not things that you have to understand code or have foundational code experience to be able to do. These are a lot of plug and play things. So I just want to reinforce that because I don't want it too intimidating for folks. Okay, keep going, Neil.
So that's kind of the setup. So I'm not I am more technical than the average bear, but I'm not like a hardcore programmer. Like this wasn't done with my team, and I'm just presenting to you. This was done at like 7 o'clock at night with my 2-year-old screaming while I pretended to drink wine.
A 2-year-old screaming. I hope you weren't pretending.
So do we want to go into like the live demo?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, okay. So I do want to set up the business problem here though. So because that's what drew me in when you were like, hey, as a sales leader, sometimes we have reps that we're trying to figure out how best to help. They might be underperforming or just not performing up to that point we believe is possible for them. Tell us a little bit about that. What was the onus to tinker at 7 p.m. with a pretend glass of wine and a 2-year-old?
Yeah, so like everyone, I have reps that are multi-tenured here, that I'm like trying to figure out how to sort of help them. I listen to their calls. I can see some surface level problems that I've tried coaching them on. But as my sales leader was asking me like, are they evolving? Are they not evolving? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? And I was
Mm,
like, I don't know. I've only been on their calls for the past couple months while I've been here. And I was like, oh, it'd be great if I could sort of automate some of these, sort of dig in deeper on some of these things. And we don't use Gong here, so I couldn't sort of dig into Gong. We use sort of another call recording software. But I was like, are their emails getting better? Are his calls getting better? And so I just wanted like, how could I do a comprehensive view? And it just felt like an LLM could sort of dig into that information and do a much better, faster, thorough job than me clicking into call recordings and listening at like 1.5x speed, like late into the night. Like that sounds exciting for
yep.
some people. That sounds not great for me.
Yep. Go for it. All right, cool. Show us what you got.
And so I've done it not only so I can do things not only in for a rep level, but what was interesting to me is that, and I think Christina as well, is that I'm doing it at a rep level, I'm doing it sort of at a manager level and an executive level, and then I'm also doing it, across the team or in forecasts. And because Claude is an LLM, everything's based on what, your imagination and natural language is coming out with.
Yeah. So
So
orient everyone real quickly to what we're looking at. Like this is your Claude instance
this is my
specifically for
Claude desktop
this,
instance. Yep.
for
And
this specific use case project that you set up.
yeah, and I didn't want to watch, I didn't think everybody wanted to watch me actually click and type as we go. So I did a little bit of Rachel Ray magic where I sort of set up a prompt and set it up knowing that this would work for the demo a little bit better.
Cool.
And then as you can see, like I totally was like, but anonymize for a public demo, which was a random hack that I figured out after I got asked to do this and I said yes. I was like, hey, analyze my sales pipeline and then create a report. And it just goes on. And so like you can tell like during the thinking mode, it's like thinking about everything, what it should go do. It's now gone into Salesforce and understands like what my Salesforce instance looks like. There's an object name called opportunity. And so it digs into those fields. It's then querying. It sort of is analyzing in a sequential way to how to solve this problem. And then it decided to also come up with like this dashboard on the right. So then it not only gave me a report, but also a dashboard, which I thought
Mhm.
was like super cool. So it's now giving me a whole report on what I should be worried about on sort of my deals as I walk into the end of my Q2
Yeah.
here.
Can I ask, like, of the stuff that came back, what were the things that were most surprising to you, like that you didn't already know from the way you were already looking at your data?
Um, so like things like this where there's like lacking economic buyers, like we do have like a MedPick dashboard,
Hmm.
but like just seeing it like pop out of like all of a sudden it's now a dollar number. Cause usually I'm looking at the number of like, oh, like we'll go individually, like, oh, do you have an economic buyer associated with your opportunity? Kind of yes or no. But then to sort
Okay.
of see it rolled up, it's just a view that I'd never sort of thought about thinking about.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden it was like, wow, that's a lot of money that we don't know who's signing the check here.
That's a great point. Okay, and I'm gonna everyone else feel free to jump in because I have so many questions. Even though we've already discussed this, I have so many questions. So one is like a quick revisit back to the setup of this. So you set up Claude Desktop for yourself, and then you hooked it to Sales. Did you? So it had access to all of your deal data.
Right.
Anything else that you set up to do this? Like, was that, would those, I know you had the connector of it with Node.js, but like, was there anything else that pulled in here that was giving additional insight?
Yeah, so to answer Chris's question on the chat, yeah, it pulls in the
Oh, yeah.
historical data. So it goes through all of Salesforce of
Cool.
whatever you ask. So I just asked it to do this. I could have potentially asked it. That's a great question of like, hey, how is this compared to last quarter or the quarters before? And then to answer Christina's question, those are the two main things I've now played.
Okay,
There's a marketplace of plugins. And so I've now played with additional ones, but for
cool.
what we're looking at right now, it's just the Claude and the Salesforce and MCP.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's great. I think what that really emphasizes to me is that you don't have to have this orchestrated, over-engineered, like pulling in all the things. You can actually start with just one system. Hey, Chandra, feel free to come off mute and just ask your question.
So I just want to maybe level set how you started the whole process, Neil. Did you have a premise of the type of questions that you wanted to ask with this connection? Or were you sort of blank slate where let me just connect these two things and then figure out what kind of questions I could ask it?
I was just sort of a blank slate, and I was just like, if an LLM had access to my Salesforce, like what kind of questions could I ask it? My very first questions were just like, list out this report of deals that are going to close this month. And then I started getting like more and more excited and started getting better prompts. And then I was like, oh, what if I took someone's framework like and threw that in there and graded my team against the framework? What if I then told them that this like I needed to let go of one person no matter what, and they had to choose which one. And so I've just been like spending all my time kind of just doing random type questions of like digging deeper. And then as soon as it'll give me back something, I'll look at it and be like, oh, that's interesting. And then that'll spark like five more questions that I have.
Gotcha. I have a part two question, if you don't mind, which is that, you have Claude and you're connecting it through Node.js to the Salesforce APIs, and that's how you establish that connectivity through the MCP protocol.
Yeah.
The level of access that you needed to provide to Claude, was that essentially admin level access so it can touch all aspects of Salesforce?
Oh,
Well,
such a great
so
question.
that's an awesome
Go ahead.
question. So actually, I'm just a like standard user, and I'll get to that so I'm just a standard user, but we don't have like strong enterprise field security at my company. So yeah, it would follow whatever your user is. And then this also is key. So it's tried to like send Apex code, like in kind of in an innocent way. I'm like, oh, do this. It's like, great, we'll make you a dashboard. Sending Apex code over to Salesforce. And Salesforce is like, no, we don't have, this user doesn't have, rights for that. So if you are an admin, be very careful because it will try to create a report programmatically, and it'll try to create Apex code to create a dashboard programmatically.
Gotcha.
I think that's such a great point. And in many instances, it's actually better if you're just a user because it limits any potential concerns around, it going off-road. I know that's a concern for a lot of folks. Any more questions, Chandra?
The only other question is if you expect similar results if we were to do this with ChatGPT, or was it because the MCP protocol is not available with ChatGPT?
Yeah, so the MCP protocol is not available with ChatGPT,
Okay.
but you notice that I gave the little quiet disclaimer that I'm actually using a llama. So with the server protocol, you can actually not have to use Claude. You can use ChatGPT, Gemini, or a llama if you set it up. So you can use a number of the different ones. Um, so you can use any of them. And I've played back and around. It's kind of funny because on some of that, like there's a different flavor on each one of them when you ask them different questions. I've sort of tested it. But I think Claude's been incredibly good. So I haven't played too much with sort of switching models other than Claude and Llama.
Good. Thank you.
Thanks for those. Ben, you want to ask your question? I think it's a good one.
Yeah, hey guys. This is super cool. and like my mind's buzzing with different things you can do with it. So thanks for sharing this. But I'm wondering at what level of data is it scraping from SFTC or syncing from SFTC? Like all of our conversation insights are all added to Salesforce by default, Gong, emails, like LinkedIn messages, stuff like that. So in theory, could you also pull insights from conversation data?
Yeah, so it pulls it. So we have Avoma is our call provider, and it actually doesn't send over like the transcript. It just sends over the like recap. But what I'll do is I'll say be specific and show example and cite examples. And so it will go through the transcripts and the emails, and it'll say, Bob Smith said, we'll connect later next week, end quote. And then Claude will come back and say, oh, this is an example of not setting concrete next steps. And I'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, wow, that was really specific. That was awesome. So yeah, it'll go through email quote, like emails, pull out quotes from emails, pull out quotes from call transcripts, pull out quote from LinkedIn messages.
I,
Sweet.
I
Thank
want
you.
to, yeah, cool. And if anyone else, please feel free to jump in if you have other questions to clarify. Like the goal is to be able to not only show you the ideas, but like as you're figuring out how to create it for yourself, please feel free to jump in. Neil, I want to jump to the other use case that you were using, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, a lot of folks on this call are go-to-market leaders. You did some really cool things around prioritizing your day and how to figure out the most important things. And then you also had one more use case, but I'd love to jump into some of those other ones because they were super cool as well.
Um,
Oh, and while you're navigating to that, Chris, like tell us, what are you doing?
We're kind of trialing it out right now in some mock data. One of our CSM leaders, he's a crazy technical guy. And what he's doing right now is trying to take email exchanges between our customers and our like CSM team, and then use them to generate summaries like current like account statuses to really like reduce the administrative burden on them, while simultaneously seeing if we can get some sort of sentiment analysis and then combine that with usage metrics to get a better read into what account health scores are. Right now, though, it's really just serving its purpose to kind of get us a read on the latest developments of the account where we were kind of having trouble keeping up.
Sure,
Yeah,
that's
but
cool.
it's
Chris, I
really
think that's an
really
excellent.
possible. It's just like so long as you can transact data across systems, these models are getting more powerful by the day, so the possibilities are getting more and more endless.
Yeah, Chris, when ChatGPT first came out 2 years ago, like everybody, my head was spinning. And the first thing came to just how do I make my life better because I'm selfish? And I was like, every executive just wants to know what's going on in the account. Like, just give me an up to date of like what's really going on in the account. And I was, and like many, many cycles are spent just like updating managers and executives. And I was like, wow, if it could just do that. Like that would be, I'd pay as much money as I could to have that.
Totally, totally. All right, tell us what we're seeing here on the screen.
So like everyone, I have reps that are doing really well in the middle and as sort of low performers. And so I dug in and I was like, okay, so I've got this low performer before I put them on a performance improvement plan. Like, how can I have a conversation with her or them about how we sort of up level the person? And so I started digging into like how can we improve these rep sales cycles? And so it came back and I just, some of the prompts were very easy of just like, hey, tell me about Bob Smith and how I can improve them. And it came out with like, hey, here's a number of actions. Would you like me to dig deeper? And so I just respond and say, yes, we'll see what's going on. And so it's hilarious. It's not hilarious, but it's interesting because this nails in a very articulate way what some of the reps like problems and challenges are. And it's been very clear because this is sort of anonymized. It took away some of the quotes, but a lot of times when I ran it the first time, it would have a quote right after it to Ben to back to your point.
That's very cool. I mean, I think even having your reps know that you're doing this type of analysis can create a very good open dialogue for improvement. And it's like, I think a lot of sales leaders sometimes don't do this until it's almost too late. And
Right.
so that doesn't allow us to take that corrective action before putting someone on a PIP. I think this is really smart. This is cool.
Yeah. So I had a sales rep that was, it's been underperforming and I ran this analysis with them And I, because I have 2 years of analysis, I ran the first time, the first quarter they were here, middle, all four, like all a bunch of quarters. And I brought it up to them of, hey, this is what I noticed. And it had quotes. And I was like, there's not like a steady improvement. Like this is where you're falling. Like you get the first surface level pain, but you don't dig in. And that wasn't a change
Yeah.
back then. And it still hasn't been a change now. And so it really opened up a conversation because they believed and knew that I did my homework of really, really digging into their calls.
And to your earlier point, like as a leader, you can't, it takes a lot of calls and a lot of listening to be able to get to that type of insight. And the reality is nobody has time. And that's why the real power of a lot of these transcripts came after we could actually analyze them in a more um, horizontal way. So I think that's super cool. Is anyone else doing anything like this? Like we've heard from Chris and like Ben, you had some great points. Is anyone else doing something similar to this to manage or coach their reps? We'd love to hear. All right, we'll keep going. If you have ideas about things you want to do, please bring them up and we can figure out how to make them happen. Go ahead, Neil, show us. What is this one?
I think, yeah. So one of the things that I have struggled with either other tools or other tools is that like I want to know what Rumsfeld called the unknown unknowns. And so I do spend a lot of times like when Christina was like, "Hey, was there something that you didn't like? Was there something surprising or insightful here that you didn't know?" A lot of times we're very good with the sort of just like all the reports because we're like, "Great, John has a 20% close rate. He's got X number of deals. We think he's going to close those." But I thought what
Nice.
was interesting was I keep asking Claude and the LLMs like, "Hey, find me something that I don't know." And like don't be nice. Like I can handle the truth. And so it'll dig in and sort of start to find like really insightful insights. And all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, yeah." And like I know people use it for like therapists and stuff, but like having someone just be that like really brutal person of like, "Hey, my team's winning small and losing big." Yeah, that's right. Yeah, this is the challenge of mid-market, right? Like we get a bunch of smaller deals where the people came in with budget, they knew their use cases, bam. That middle level ground of like, well, we've got one or two, but we don't know quite how to quantify it. I still have to go to a CFO for real budget, and like I'm getting beat up there. So that's it nailed it.
I think, what's interesting to me too is there's always been this want to have a feedback loop from sales, but also the rest of the organization not quite believing the feedback from sales because it feels very anecdotal. It feels very one-off. And what we can do is now show the patterns around those insights that the reps know in their gut on the front line. And I think that this creates a more trusted feedback loop that does just that. Maybe it's a product issue. Maybe it's like, we're way off on the use cases and the reps are just executing against the process that and the strategy that we've deemed relevant. So I think that's really cool. Let's see. We created.
So one thing about the feedback, so
Mhm.
we've implemented Sandler here, and Sandler, most of sales tries to get to some value level conversation. They all call it different things. And I was like, I asked the reps individually, "Hey, have you done an ROI use case?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah." And they've done it like once or twice. They're like, "Nobody really asks in our segment. Don't worry." So then I
Mhm.
use this to dig back and go through the call transcripts of like, are like look for any sort of value things, and it created a prompt on its own to help me. And it was like value,
Yeah.
ROI. And I noticed that we were getting asked a lot of times, and then the rep would immediately sort of think it was an objection, kind of put it aside, and then never do anything about it. And surprise, our win rate was like in the single digits at like
Yeah.
2% if we ignored those conversations.
Yeah. That's a great point. I love that. Um, what else you got, Neil? Or should we move on to our opening up discussion topics? Like, you got more for us
Well,
here.
so I think it's interesting. So like some of the things that I'm moving on with is like, how do I use frameworks? So like I was like, hey, we just went through Sandler training. I now want to sort of reinforce that. And it's sort of me just jumping on a call and being like, Christina, you didn't do your upfront contract. I was like, let's look across deals and mini calls that people are actually doing that. So I said, hey, we just did Sandler. I just gave it the natural language prompt of we just did Sandler, create a framework so that I can grade my reps. And they said yes. And so I pulled it out and started going through each rep one by one and giving me an assessment, which was awesome.
That's
And
super cool.
they've started to sort of redo this, right? So like upfront contracts,
Yeah.
that's good. And then I went to like organizational buy-in. So I think Chris had some of these questions. I was like, what wins and what doesn't win? And like, surprise, surprise, our CEO and board is asking about this. So it's a board level pain, or like, we already have budget. Wow, what do you know? We really win. Someone has a budget and we're the first ones. And then there's a bunch of ones that were high correlation with losses. Need to check with IT. One of several. And then I took in the Topo go-to-market framework. And it was like, hey, go grade my team. And so it did that as well. So I just was like kind of throwing everything at it to see what assessment I could do. I will say that I've spent like too much time doing this, and that I'm now in a little bit of analysis paralysis because I now have all the information.
That's for you ask your GPT. I'm in analysis paralysis. What's the most important thing I should go do? Yeah, I think that's awesome.
And so another level of like frameworks of descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. I'd first heard about this, I don't know, 12 years ago. And like have been chasing this my like 15 years in sales of like, usually we know what happened. Most of the time we can figure out why it happened, but getting to the sort of predictive point of like what's going to happen and like what to do. So like focus on these deals with the money, deploy competitive battle cards. Like now we're starting to get into prescriptive areas, which I think is really helpful for me as a leader to sort of like get a gut check on, am I focusing on the right things and where are my lever points?
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I think one of the challenges, and you spoke to this earlier with being able to get that sort of quick read on what's happening in an account, is a lot of times we have to react. Like all of a sudden the deal's in trouble, or this customer came super pissed off, and like we have to react quickly. And so we've set up this infrastructure where we try to maintain that level of understanding of every single account all the time, and it's impossible to be
Right.
ready for those reactive moments. But then we never get around to the proactive, prescriptive things we can do as much. The best reps do, but systematically, we're just not good at that. And if we know we can get that quick read, then we don't spend as much time just maintaining that. And we can now not only react, but also be more prescriptive when those reactionary things are not occurring. So I think that's super cool. Okay, I want to thank you for this, Neil, and please feel free to jump in and add more thing. Oh, this looks important if you want to
Well,
cover
I
that.
was gonna say like the
Yeah, do
specificity
that, and
win,
then we'll
like
we'll do discussion stuff. But go ahead.
like better than prompting. I figured like Robert's on the call. We talked about this a lot of like having the LM build the prompts. So like my first step is always I'd like to go do this, but I don't really know what I'm asking for. But I want a Salesforce performance report, and so it'll go build it, and then I'll copy paste it, and then I'll run it. So I'm not building like the world's greatest prompt person over here. But what I've noticed was
Mhm.
when, like you sort of ask it to build the prompt and then run it, even more than on like just general LM stuff, like that's been like sort of the unlock is like let it go figure out what the best frameworks are. Don't like spend 30 minutes thinking that I haven't even clue. It spits it back in
Yeah.
seconds.
Oh, I think that's really cool. And you can add some guiding boundaries in, like if you've got a specific methodology or if there's specific parts of the funnel you want to analyze. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So just like the issues I've run into, like it hasn't been perfect. It can run for a really
Mhm.
long time and then not be what I want. And I was like, damn it, that was like 7 minutes. And like it came out, it was beautiful, but like I was just like, well, that was not useful at all. Um, to the point of like, if you're an admin, it will try and create Apex code and create fields. So like, don't run it as an admin. And then just kind of, this is kind of funny, like it has missing context. So like it told me one of my reps was a low performer for not doing anything for a week. He was on PTO. So he just didn't know that he was on vacation and was like, you should really check in. They seem like they've checked out. I'm like, hopefully he's on a beach in Hawaii, really checked out. So these were just some of my
Funny.
like, uh-oh points that I thought were both kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And I think, I mean, with that middle one, even though it's scary, I mean, I think we can specify some of those things in the instructions too. Or, for example, if you are someone with admin access, maybe you create a secondary profile that has limited access or sort of more standard reporting type access. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's some ways to navigate that. This is awesome. Neil, please don't go anywhere because we want your take on a lot of these discussion items as well. So for everyone, thank you so much for putting the topics in our discussion guide. I'm going to paste that link again for anyone. And what I would like us to do now is we've got a bunch of them in there. Everybody gets 3 votes. Just do a star, but go in and put your votes next to the top that you most want to talk about next. And we'll give everybody a few minutes to do that. Let me repaste the link for anyone who needs it here. And if you want to add more topics too, that's fine. But let's just take a second to vote up topics that you think might be interesting. And Ben, feel free to add your star, even though you added a comment. We want to make sure it's counted. And they continue on to the second page, so keep that in mind. All right. Neil, feel free to add stars as well. And thank you so much. That was awesome. Ooh, we got a lot of sales enablement interest. All right. Hot dog. Okay. And if you want to use all 3 of your stars for a specific topic, you can totally do that as well. And I'm not tracking anyone's star usage here, so we'll just use good faith here. All right. Okay. We've definitely got okay, now I got to count the little stars here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, people are going crazy for sales enablement. All right. Take maybe another 30 seconds to add your stars. And if we don't get to your topics this week, we're going to start doing this topic discussion thing every week. So like you can bring back, or every time we meet, every other week. And so you can bring those topics back up or any new topics as needed. So don't be afraid to do that. And then you can always reach out to us if you need it. All right, I'm gonna call it for a second here. And let's start with sales enablement. Although I would say like our second runner up here using AI for self-coaching and manager coaching is somewhat similar, but let's just start with sort of the global sales enablement question. Who put that one in? I'm just so curious. And tell us some context for how you're thinking about that. Anybody want to claim that one? All right. If you don't, that's totally fine. I'll tell you what we're seeing with folks, why I think this is getting so many stars is sales enablement is just sort of that ever present, ever pressing challenge. And we are seeing some really cool things for how people are using AI to enable their reps, from DIY solutions through to like specific tools. So I'll maybe just touch on a little bit of both, and then I'd love for everybody else to jump in, talk about what you're seeing or what you're trying, and we can make it very collaborative. So one is the tools. The tools that I'm seeing out there for sales enablement are the one are mimicking role plays and or any sort of ongoing practice that doesn't require another person. So it could be literally an AI avatar for role playing. It could be a text-based quiz type of thing where, you know, it will take some content and it will quiz the rep on things like personas. What does this persona care about? But that ability for reps to get in practice on their own time has been very interesting, and we're cool stuff there. I'm also seeing folks trying to create some of that themselves. The role playing is a little harder to create yourselves, but what people are doing is like, hey, we have a new product launch or we have a new pricing model or something like that. They'll actually create these fun little interactive quizzes. Like they'll using a GPT, they'll say, create me a 15 question quiz that's randomized and rotates questions so that reps can take it multiple times to test themselves on what they remember and what they don't, so that they're ready to talk to a prospect. Or it will do things like ask them not only multiple choice, but like short answer, like they would on a call to answer that question. So I think those are really exciting things that I'm seeing folks to do, but there's many other use cases. I want to specifically call on Robert because I'm sure he's got a really great opinion on this. Go for it, Robert.
Yeah, Christina, this is one of the ones I starred, and there were three
Awesome.
reasons. One, the challenge of onboarding. Lots and lots of enablement programs where it takes months to ramp sellers. Sales leaders are always asking for how can you ramp them more quickly, more efficiently. So that's one. Onboarding is a big area. Two is personas. We talk a lot about messaging. Companies talk a lot about understanding the buyer. And it's always been a big issue of how do we help sellers, particularly in onboarding, better understand the stakeholders that we're selling to, what are their challenges, what are they trying to solve, and really understanding their business. So we think more like consultants and business people. And then the third challenge of enablement that I see is content generation, which you talk to. There's content all over the place, and enablement teams typically take lots of time to put all this content together, and then they stick it up in an LMS, and it's hard to find, and it becomes a big check the box exercise. So some
Yeah.
things, so those are all big challenges. And a couple of things that I'm seeing that are exciting is folks are using it to quickly regenerate onboarding, to do a lot more role play and simulation much more quickly, because there's a lot of research out there that the quicker you get into it and the quicker you start practicing as a new hire, the better. Two, there's a lot of folks that are using just with chat GPT prompting themselves or third-party solutions. They're training up models on their personas so that the new sellers or current sellers can talk to these personas, ask them questions to learn, and then also practice with them prior to a sales interview. And then in content generation, there's lots of different AI tools. Google's the low-hanging fruit, where you can create content and videos in a matter of 7 to 10 minutes. And part of that gets past the problem of all this outdated content that enablement and product marketing and marketing teams are always trying to deal with.
I love that. Patricia, I just saw your chat. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that if you're willing?
Well, it was I've been with my company for 5 years. It was the first time I was going to be out of town when we had a new hire starting, a new AE. So I thought, let me test him out on something. And it worked great. So I did do it in ChatGPT. We try to
Okay.
use Gemini as much as we can, but for this particular instance, ChatGPT worked much better.
Okay.
And I asked it to make sure it didn't advance until the person went through and answered all the questions, especially on personas. If, like in the construction industry, it focused on 3 personas. And it would either ask them, hey, which persona does this sound like? Or fill in the blank with, it's a VDC manager. And what does this person care about?
Yeah.
What are the top use cases? And then it went through to industry training. So I liked how it interacted with someone. So it makes it a lot more fun than listening to endless recordings and just
Totally.
taking a quick little quiz. And
Yeah.
so it was a really fun way to go through and get this person started, especially with the beginning things where it's learning about industry and all of that. And then I'll move on into sales process, et cetera. And then I just uploaded our personas and any other documentation we needed. So
That's
that
super
part was,
cool.
yeah, it was super cool. So it was really fun to do. And I did the same thing. I built the initial one in Create, and then I just went back and said, hey, I need to refine this. And it would just keep adjusting it until it got to where I wanted it to be. So
Oh, that's
super
amazing.
helpful.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So I have a couple of questions because that's so interesting. I mean, I'm thinking of like old school, the issues we used to have with enablement is you can't spend every moment of every day with a new person. And so we often like give them something to do. And it's usually really boring, consuming content, reading it. And then maybe we'll get together and do a quiz or we do some sort of discussion to test their learning. But it's a really kind of terrible early experience for that new hire. They're like, oh, this is so boring. And so I wonder, like, how did your rep feel about this? Like, did it make them feel like they got taken care of, even though like you weren't available? Like, what feedback did you get?
Yeah. So I met with him yesterday, and the nice part is he's someone who's already dabbled in AI. So for him, it was super fun. He's like,
Perfect.
oh, I'm already, because, I work with people, I've been running these like mini AI workshops, and some people are like, okay, I'm just getting started. I use it to check my grammar. I'm writing a follow-up
Yeah.
email, and I built when I train them, they build their own custom GPT in Gemini. It's a gem, and I have like a AE assistant. It'll be pick what you want to do, create a follow-up email or something
Yeah.
like that, so they can see how it works with the logic built in. Or I teach them how to prompt, just simply, give it as much information as possible, assume a role, because most of them will just type things in. And deep
Yeah.
research, like I said, we use Gemini. I'm amazed at how many people don't use deep research, and it's so powerful.
Yeah.
So for him, it was really fun. And he said, yes, it worked great. And so he was willing to engage. And as soon as I got back, I met with him because you still need that human touch and make sure that
Totally.
they work through that. But I think it gives a little bit more variety rather than go read this, go listen to this, and then you have meetings. And then what's typical is at the end of week 3, you kind of forget everything. It's just information overload. So at least they can
Yeah.
go back and
Yeah.
revisit this over and over. Yeah. So that's
Oh,
been
that's
helpful, and content also. Marketing can't keep up with content. So I'm taking a lot of recordings. They'll interview customers, and I just take those recordings and I dump them into whatever I'm using at the time. And I'm just like, give me the ROI, any ROI statements or any statements I can use in a 1-page case study. And then I can just, put that together really fast. So I'm,
Whoa, I love that. I love that. Okay, I have an idea, and because I'd love for this to be like, how can we also make each other's better? So take this or leave it. But on that point of things being boring for the rep, I wonder if it would be really cool to create opportunities in the GPT to like encourage that new AE to go out to their peers. So it's like, hey, you just did this. You should go talk to so and so about this example and this deal. It could recommend ways for them to engage and things to talk about. Because one of the hardest things when you're new is you're on an island, right? And you don't know anyone. And some teams do a really great job of manufacturing this by like setting up calls for you to talk to everyone as a way to get to know them. But I wonder if there's an opportunity to build that into your GPT so that it starts helping them build those connections in a more autonomous way. So take it or leave it, but I think that could be a fun thing to explore. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas either, but I love that, Patricia. That's super cool.
I know, Christina, there's one company I worked with that used AI to help get to snippets in the transcripts quicker. And they were able to say, listen to these 7 snippets, and you
Cool.
just click on it, would take you to, I think they were using Gong, but it can take you to whatever call recording software that is being used so that they can
That's
see and
cool.
hear examples of what's great.
I love that. I want to also, so our second slash equal top priority here was using AI for self-coaching or manager coaching. Has anyone done anything cool there for either yourself or someone on your team, or just ideas that you have?
So what I did was when I hooked up Claude, I also put it, it can attach to your Google Calendar, and I use Todoist. So actually it hooked up those two as well in my emails, and so Salesforce, and I told it to be brutally honest and to prioritize my day. And so it
Mhm.
would do a great job of telling me what I needed to focus on and what I didn't need to focus on. And it was good because it did it out. So like do these 3 tasks because they're high priority, even if I didn't mark them as high priority. And then it flagged an unread email that was buried. And then it flagged like a deal that was approaching a close date that was coming up really rapidly. So actually I did a great job on doing that. And it's been very humbling to have it do that for the past couple of days.
But I mean, I also wonder if it just helps you like remove some of the emotional burden of remembering, right? It's
Yeah.
like you have that safety net to like things are not going to get dropped and forgotten. Now, how much we trust that 100%, maybe not yet, but I think that's pretty powerful. It's like come up behind me and just make sure all the things are taken care of. I heard a really cool example from someone I was working with that it was a COO who had to have a very tough conversation with their sales leader. And the sales leader was getting it done from a meeting the numbers mostly standpoint, but was incredibly conservative, like very conservative about strategy and pushing the limits of growth and all these things. And I mean, like super conservative, like flat year over year, like I can do what I did last year type of thing. And she's like, I don't know how to have this conversation with him. She was not a sales leader. And she did not have that expertise, but she was like, I need to figure out how to have this feedback conversation that we can't be flat. And so she used GPT to assess his performance, which was on paper good, but also to help her articulate what she couldn't articulate about how to get him to go to that next level. And as weird as that is, like from a self-coaching standpoint, no matter how much experience we have, sometimes there are scenarios we've not been in. And so we just need a little bit of a helper to figure out how to have that dialogue or how to set that strategy into the right direction. I thought that was a really cool self-coaching example. So yeah, anybody else have any other examples or ideas that you want to try around self-coaching or manager coaching?
Christina, I'll jump in again and hope that
Sure.
somebody else will rip the microphone away from me. And that is on a very basic level, AI for dummies or AI for Robert. I've taken transcripts out of call recordings and run it through some basic prompts just to say, come back, build a prompt for me to analyze this call according to these exit criteria and tell me what they should continue doing, what they should start doing, what they should stop doing. And based on these 5 criteria, grade the call on a scale of 1 to 5. And then I've also done that for a whole series of calls to get a quick analysis because I, like Neil, used to go through and spend tons of time going through all these call recordings at 2 times speed. And it would take me sometimes an hour and 15 minutes to go through a 30, 45-minute call and
Yeah.
do a good analysis and come back with thoughtful coaching. And I've
Yeah.
also done that for some sales leaders in the scale portfolio to get them being more efficient with their time. So they'll observe a few in person and then they'll run other transcripts of key calls or key deals, that are must-win deals
Mm,
through ChatGPT. One other thing, because there's 2 sides to the coin, as we were talking about yesterday, Christina. There's the whole side of people are building all these cool prompts like Neil, and then there's also commercial applications. There are, I don't want to get into specific vendors, but there are companies like Grow AI, Luster, Coach Hub that are allowing companies to scale coaching. They will help reps self-assess. Plus, they'll also, through the LLM models, allow you to take one of your own sales leaders and sort of replicate them at scale, which gets
yeah.
around the challenge of, hey, we always talk about the importance of sales coaching, but the reality is it's still sellers are woefully undercoached. And so some of those applications for those that are interested here on the phone are worth taking a look at if you're not going to build the prompts yourself.
Totally. I think that's a really great point. And I think, this discussion we were having yesterday is we are doing our AI benchmark survey, and the early data is showing a pretty even split between sort of the build versus buy conversation. And the reality is, sometimes it's very intimidating that, I have to be super technical, I have to get really good at prompting. And while those are great upskilling things to do over time, it's a lot of people are in the mix today and having to figure out how do I go solve this today without having to first become more of an expert? And the reality is there are some very simple ways to get progress through DIYing that are not complex, not technical. And so I would just, shout out for everyone on this call. If that's something you want to talk to our EIRs about, please reach out to us. Absolutely. Because there are a lot of ways we can just get people started. I think the last session where we created a custom GPT and ChatGPT, and you can do the same with GEMS, was very eye-opening. There were a lot of people who created their very first GPT and now are kind of addicted. And they're like, well, it's like Neil, he set out to do one problem and now he's like spun in and hooked in all this other stuff. Because really the only way to get good at it is to do it. And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect from it, but the results you get from it are correlated to what you put into it. And what you put into it is not just like knowing all the best practices that you feel like you have to learn. It's about understanding how to specify what you want. And I think, as all of the AI engineers out there are talking about the models and how they're changing, the message that underlies all of it is still, it can only give you what you ask for. And it can only do so with the context you share. And so the more we can get good about specifying what we want and specifying that hidden context in our world, the more we can get from these. So keep in mind, if you want help, that's what we're here for. And I know we're running out of time here. We just have a few minutes left. We will be back on in 2 weeks, Wednesday, same time. I don't have the date handy, but 2 weeks from today. And we're going to do a similar format. If we have other people that want to show off what you're working on, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't necessarily have to create slides the way Neil did, but we'd love to just do that sharing. please reach out to us. We'd love to have you share with the group. Thank you, June 18th. Appreciate you, Robert. And then we will do similar things. If there are hot topics that you want to discuss, just come to lab. We'll prioritize them and we'll try to get to your topics accordingly. If you had topics that are really hot for you and we didn't get to them today, also feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to tackle some of those one-on-one. Mark, any final thoughts before we close out here?
Last thing I'll note, we are starting a Slack or a Discord. We haven't decided exactly which one, but we're starting a community, and all of you will receive invitations to that in the next week or so. So if you see that, well, just know that it's from us. We're going to use that as an offline space to continue the conversations that we're having live on this forum. So keep your eyes peeled.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll keep this same discussion doc. So if you have topics you want to put in for next time, I'll create the section for next time and go ahead and put those in whenever you want. Cool. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We appreciate it. I hope this was helpful. I hope you got some great ideas. We're here to help if you need it, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.